Hello, and welcome to Aging Insights. I'm Melissa Chalker, Executive Director of the New Jersey Foundation for Aging. During the stay-at-home order due to COVID-19, we've been filming the show virtually and having guests join us from the safety of their own home or sometimes their place of business. As we continue to monitor the situation and plan for future episodes, we also realize it's summer, and perhaps some people are trying to enjoy that and spend time when they can with family or friends. Therefore, we are bringing you this episode, number 107, as an encore presentation of episode 80. Episode 80 originally aired in May of 2018 and was titled Conversation of Your Life. At that time, I was joined by two guests who explained to us what end-of-life decision-making means and why you should be having a conversation about it with your loved ones. We feel it's especially important right now as we're all still dealing with the impact of COVID-19 to learn more about this and to have the conversation yourself. So please enjoy this episode and learn as much as you can, and feel free afterwards to visit the following websites for more resources: Goals of Care Coalition of New Jersey, The Conversation Project, 5 Wishes, and Conversation of Your Life. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to tune in next time. Welcome to Aging Insights. I'm Melissa Chalker, Deputy Director of the New Jersey Foundation for Aging. The Foundation's mission is to enable seniors to live with independence and dignity in their communities. Aging Insights is produced by the New Jersey Foundation for Aging to provide information and resources to boomers, seniors, and caregivers. Talking about our end-of-life wishes is not something most of us want to discuss. However, it is one of the most important conversations of your life, as our guest today will tell us. We are joined by Deborah Levine, Director of Community Health at New Jersey Healthcare Quality Institute, and Ted Taylor, Director of the Department of Pastoral Care and Training at Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital in Hamilton. They're here today to talk to us about some projects that help communities talk about wellness, including end-of-life planning, and why it's important to have that conversation and even to put your wishes in writing. Welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. Deborah, I would like to start with you. If you could explain to everyone a little bit about your organization, because people might not know what the Healthcare Quality Institute is. So if you could just explain that briefly for us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us here today. The New Jersey Healthcare Quality Institute is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, multi-stakeholder advocate for healthcare quality in New Jersey. We run a variety of state-level health policy projects, but the project I run day to day is our grassroots community-level programming through a program called the Mayor's Wellness Campaign.
Yeah, and that's one of the main things we want to talk to you about today, because it relates to the topic that we're going to eventually get to. And so tell us a little bit more about the Mayor's Wellness Campaign and what it is and what else it might encompass.
Sure. So the Mayor's Wellness Campaign, as I mentioned, is our grassroots community-level programming. Our office works with just about 400 mayors across the state, so about 70% of the mayors in the towns in New Jersey, to try to identify and meet their local health goals through no to low cost creative programming. As you can imagine, the health goals in North Jersey are very different from the health goals in South Jersey.
Sure.
So we really try to customize our approach by working with each individual mayor and his or her champions on the ground, by providing them with tools and resources and technical assistance to meet their goals. Our office just launched a brand new tools and resources part of our website, which I'd encourage viewers to check out. There are about 30 evidence-based step-by-step program ideas.
And so we're going to talk today about this conversation of your life and how that fits into the Mayor's Wellness Campaign. Could you give us some ideas of some of the other things some of the mayors have focused on?
Sure. So there are a number of health and wellness priorities across New Jersey, again, depending on where the town is, socioeconomic status, geography, jobs available, etc. Some towns are focusing on combating rising obesity rates. Other towns are focusing on improving education around mental health and mental health first aid. Others, through our Conversation of Your Life programming, are focused on encouraging New Jersey adults to discuss their end-of-life wishes in fun, creative community events, part of the Mayor's Wellness Campaign.
Right. I think it's a really great idea, and I love the description of the Mayor's Wellness Campaign as a grassroots community thing, because you really are working with the mayor and their staff on what their community needs and tailoring programs to that. So I think it's great, and so I'm so happy that you're here today to talk to us in particular about Conversation of Your Life, which is one of the tools that's available to mayors to talk to their community about. So could you explain a little bit about how that became part of the Mayor's Wellness Campaign and what it really is for folks?
Yeah, so Conversation of Your Life has been part of the Mayor's Wellness Campaign for about 4 years now. A few years ago, the Quality Institute did research in partnership with the Rutgers Eagleton Center for Public Interest Polling, and we spoke to a number of our members and community partners around New Jersey to talk about New Jerseyans' attitudes towards end-of-life care. And what we found through an early poll with Rutgers was that about 60% of New Jersey adult respondents said they're comfortable talking about their end-of-life wishes. They'd be happy to do that, whether at a wellness visit or at the dinner table. But the same number had never done that before.
Wow.
So we saw a really important opening for programming and knew this had to happen at the grassroots level. And we wanted to work with mayors who we see as champions of change to really drive change at the ground level.
Sure.
So we started Conversation of Your Life in 3 pilot towns with the support of the mayors in those towns who had just recently lost loved ones and personally knew the importance of having these conversations.
Yeah, and your research also, in addition to determining who was willing to talk and had they had the conversation, also found that people weren't utilizing the tools that are available for someone to put their end-of-life wishes into writing, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, a higher number than we'd like. We're certainly not using a number of different advanced directive tools out there to document their wishes. Right. And based on that, we knew it was important that before focusing on documenting your wishes, it was so important to discuss them.
Yeah. So I know we do want to talk a lot about how to discuss them and why it's important to discuss them, but I think we do need to, at least for the viewing audience, give them an idea of what tools are available. So could we kind of go through some of the terminology people might be hearing, like advanced directive, which you just mentioned, healthcare proxy, a healthcare power of attorney, and a post form. I know you have a document on your website that's available for people to go and get a little bit more information about those, but could you give us a basic description of some of those tools that are available to people, and then we'll talk about why they should be using them?
And this document that you're referencing, this is our consumer-facing Conversation of Your Life trifold. It's available in English and Spanish on the Quality Institute's website. Perfect. And we bring to all of our community programs through Conversation of Your Life. And I think one of the most useful parts within this trifold is a tricky terms cheat sheet. A lot of people get tripped up on a number of different types of advanced directives out there. So the term that I just used, advanced directive, just briefly, is a legal document that lets you spell out your decisions for end-of-life care. And that can take a few different forms, including a living will, which is a legal document that spells out the medical treatments you'd like to keep you alive, or the medical treatments you don't want. A proxy directive, or a durable power of attorney for health care. That's a little more specific, and it names a person you'd like to make decisions for you, your healthcare proxy, if you can't speak for yourself. And then a 5 wishes, which is a legal advance directive in 42 states, including New Jersey. It's sort of my favorite because it's called a living will with a heart and soul. It's written in very plain language.
Yeah, and I think in a little bit we'll get into a little bit more detail. I'd like to share with folks the 5 wishes because it is a really great tool. But I wanted people to have a basic understanding of what we're talking about when we say there are tools available for them to have this conversation. And in particular, 5 wishes is a really great way to open the door to not just sitting your family down and saying, when I'm ill, I don't want this or I do want that. And it, as you said, gives a little bit more heart to it as well. So, based on the events that you've done around Conversation of Your Life, what have you really found as to why people don't want to have this conversation?
Sure. So those events can take a few different forms. All around the state, with the support of dedicated volunteers, task force members, just like Ted, we're running programming through Conversation of Your Life in 8 counties in New Jersey. And that can be anything from a film screening with a discussion that follows, to a panel discussion with a few different types of experts speaking, to even a card game, an art display. We try to make this conversation very approachable in comfortable community settings, like your library or house of worship. Once in a while when we're at events, attendees will share why they may not have completed an advance directive, or why they may have been afraid to have this conversation. And the reason is it makes a lot of sense. People are scared. Talking about death or end-of-life wishes is intimidating. The topic is rather taboo, sometimes even among doctors. So it can be really hard to bring this up, even if you'd like to. Sometimes there are even cultural barriers, or your family might just not be willing to talk about that.
Well, I talk to families about end of life every day. My conversation with them is to give them a perspective of hope. That conversation of a lifetime is a part of the journey, and it helps them, because a lot of times family look at the destination End of life can be frightening to people. Conversation of a lifetime helps them to make it beautiful.
As human beings with emotions, it can be difficult both for us and for our family members to really face that reality that we might not someday be here with them, right? And then I think, as you kind of referenced, the other added layer is the difficulty in understanding the terms and what's available and who do I talk to about putting these things in place. So I think what you're doing through trying to educate people both about getting more comfortable about the topic, but also how to utilize the tools and who can help them with the tools is a really important piece of the campaign. So I think we've touched on it a little bit, but my go-to question on this is why should people be having this conversation, and why should they be putting it in writing?
It is so important for people to have this conversation, the conversation of your life, so that their wishes for end of life, we talk about planning for a birth, practicing for your driver's license. We talk about car seats. We talk about everything surrounding the beginning of life. Why not talk about the end of life too? It's such an important thing to have planned, and it's really important to have your own wishes honored, because if you don't talk about your wishes, then your family, your loved ones, your doctors are going to give it their best guess, and you might not receive the care that you truly want. And when you do speak about your wishes, your family members then have that gift of clarity. They don't have to guess, they don't have to argue, which we see too often. They know exactly what their loved one wants. That's the goal.
Yeah, and I think it's a beautiful goal and a program that's really well done. The description you gave previously about how you're drawing people in, whether it's a library or house of worship, it sounds like you're really making it a comfortable place and providing some level of something that's fun to draw them in, so it's not just a big poster that says, come talk about how you want to die, right? So explain a little bit more about the reasoning behind making the programs that approachable.
Sure. So we want to make this kind of programming accessible to the community. It's our goal, working with a task force of advisors in every single county that this is running in, that includes clergy, lawyers, librarians, lay people, medical professionals, elected officials, of course, mayors, county surrogates. We want to make sure that leaders in the community and anyone, lay people included, who are concerned about this as an important topic, are able to bring this conversation to the community. And we feel that making it this conversation in a comfortable setting, someplace you can imagine yourself having coffee and sitting down and chatting with your neighbor, is the best approach, because we'll have more engaged audience. You won't be scared walking into a medical setting to talk about this. Might be even easier to gain the trust of the community in a setting that they're comfortable in when talking about something that can be intimidating or difficult.
Yeah. That's terrific. I really appreciate you sharing that information with you, and I'm also very happy that we have one of your community partners with us. That you've described the process of how these events work, and that there usually is someone there to provide detailed information and participate as part of a panel or something. And Ted, you've been that person for the Healthcare Quality Institute in terms of helping out at some of these panel discussions and some of the conversation of your life events. But before we talk a little bit more about that, I thought maybe you could explain a little bit of how what your professional life is and how you got involved in talking about this specific topic.
Sure. So I've been at Robert Wood Johnson Hamilton for 11 years now as the Director of Pastoral Care and Training. So that job is a clinical chaplain's position where my work is being with people at some crisis times in life and helping individuals and sometimes their families with some of the decisions that go along with these crisis times, and many times it is end of life. And I came to that through working in hospice for about 5 years. So, and in both of those roles, I've had the opportunity to learn a lot about bioethics and especially end-of-life ethics. And it's just become a passion of mine to give people information so they can make wise choices that align with their values. And they might not align with the values of the healthcare system or the values of some of their family members. And so there needs to be clarity, and these are tools that can give clarity for people so that their wishes and their values are honored at such an important time.
Yeah, that's terrific, and really, shows how passionate you are about this and making sure that people have access to this information. So because you've been part of the conversation of your life events, what can you describe, how can you describe what people might expect when they arrive at an event? If they've seen the poster, if their town is doing some promotion of it and they arrive, what can they expect to find?
Well, I've been part of a couple of events. So we've done 2 screenings of a documentary called Being Mortal, based on the book by Atul Gawande. And those were events held at our wellness center in Hamilton. So again, it was not a hospital setting or a scary place. You serve a meal. And although we were pretty real about saying this is going to be an event where we're having these discussion and a conversation based on watching a film. And we, in both of those, we've done 2 of those so far. In both of those settings, we had different key constituencies represented in the room. So physicians, social workers, ethicists, nurses, and had a wonderful dialogue for about half an hour that probably could have gone on for hours afterwards, for people sharing stories of how things went well in their family, but sometimes how things did not go so well, and how they would want things to be. I also had the opportunity to sit on one of the panel discussions in Robbinsville, and when the mayor there invited a group of people through Conversations of Your Life, and that really was impactful too. For me, just to even learn all the other resources that I hadn't even known about by being on that panel. So, and again, it was in the senior center, a place where people were familiar and comfortable, and again, those conversations just start spilling out. People want to talk about what's important to them.
Yeah, and I think it's really great the way you've described this in terms of the settings. As we've already talked about with Deborah, how important that making the settings comfortable are, but also not necessarily that this has to be always a medical discussion or that it has to only be for people who are old. Right? This is a conversation that people could have at any stage of their life because it's about preparation and, as you said, providing some clarity to those who will be by your side at the end of your life, right?
Right. Well, and so I always encourage anyone who's of legal age to consider writing their advance directive. I mean, we never know what would happen, and any time in our lives we could come to a place where we might not be able to make decisions for ourselves. And this is all based on this ability, this core value of us having autonomy in our lives and being able to say what is important for us and how we want to be treated at such a critical time. So having these documents put in place that say this is what's important to me, having that written down, but even more important than that, this is the person that knows my values best and can speak for me. So given all the different choices that have to be made, this person knows me best and can speak on my behalf.
Yeah, and I think that's really great that in addition to providing a comfort level and people talking about it and understanding why, that the events also provides a level of education for people about the tools available. And we've given a broad overview with Deborah of those tools. But during the event, are there materials provided? Are people walking away with things that they can?
So I usually provide folks with a packet of material that we've provided at the hospital. So people come down to my office and ask about filling this out. Sometimes before procedures, they're saying, "Oh, I should have filled this out." So I walk them through that and help them complete these documents. But at these events, a packet is provided that includes information about the living will piece, and usually we use the 5 wishes, which is a great document. Not only does it then provide people with that proxy, that person to name, and also explicitly writes out their wishes, but it gives a way to talk with that person that you've named, or people that you've named, in a way that's non-threatening, but really complete. So this is kind of the gold standard for me of having those conversations.
I'm also familiar with the 5 wishes and do think it's a terrific tool, but for those watching who might not know and understand what 5 wishes is, could you give us a little bit more detail about how it works?
Sure. So it is, in most states in the country, it is a document that can act as a legal living will. And so the first wish is, who do you want to be that person to name your values, to speak for you on your behalf when you can't speak for yourself.
And so when we've talked with Deborah previously and we talked about an advance directive, that's kind of writing your wishes out, but when we're talking about assigning someone, that's what we refer to as a proxy.
Proxy,
right? I just want to make sure people are remembering what the terms are.
And there are several different terms that kind of say the same thing. So healthcare agent, proxy, all of these are basically the same idea of naming that person who knows you best, and given all of the range of options, would do the thing that you would want.
And ideally that you've had this conversation with, so that when the time comes and you can't speak for yourself, they know what you said to them and what you put into writing.
I remind people, don't surprise your proxy by naming them and then they get a call when the worst has happened and they haven't had that conversation with you. And that's why the rest of the document is so good, is that it talks through all of that, and you can have the conversations as it prompts you about what things are important for you, all the way from if I am so sick that certain things may or may not happen, that's what I do or don't want certain things, to if I get so ill that my death is imminent, this is how I want that process to be. And even once I die, these are some of the things that are important for me. Those are hard conversations, but at least this document, I think, really does a great job of easing you through the conversation. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so people walk away from this event with that understanding of how to utilize some of these tools, and with some of them they can take with them and peruse and figure out which one fits best for them. And then is there follow-up or at least some level of information given to them about who to call if they have questions, or who to call if they want advice?
Right. So I always give my contact information in here, and then there is also information on different websites, including Healthcare Quality Institute, so other places to get more information. And yeah, so it can be confusing. I mean, there's this document. You also mentioned the Pulse document that people sometimes get confused about as well. And I think even in a brief event, like one of these conversation events, you can't answer all the questions. So having some resources behind it is always helpful.
Yeah, to then be able to follow up and figure out in which way you'd like to have the conversation and what tool might fit best for you. We've mentioned a couple of them, and I know there are different legality things, and you mentioned this is legal here in New Jersey as well, and in several other states. But the POST form is something, while other states do it, there is a specific New Jersey form as well, right?
So,
there was legislation that passed to recognize this as a form that can be used as well.
Right, and I try to explain to people that as much as the living will, the 5 wishes, and advanced directive becomes valid once you can't speak for yourself, it's a legal document that sets all of that out. The POST is actually a physician's order or a medical order form. So it's a little bit different in that it's immediately operational. So, and it's based on someone who might have a life-limiting disease or medical fragility, and they want to make sure that if things escalate, that their wishes are abided by, even in the emergency. So it's a form that helps an individual, perhaps their family member, and their physician or nurse practitioner walk through all of the options and then do what's right for them. So the conversation's had way ahead of time, and if an emergency occurs, we do the right thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a great distinction, because we have thrown different terms around in different documents, and so it's a great distinction between advanced directives or the 5 wishes and writing a lot of that down to something that is a very medically based and physician ordered form that a doctor would need to sit with you and fill out and understand what your wishes are, in addition to being able to share that with your family. So I think this is really great to get the word out even more about having this conversation and the importance of it. So I did ask Deborah, but as our kind of wrap up, Ted, why is it important to you, do you think, that people have this conversation? Why do you think people should be talking about it with their family and loved ones?
I was talking to Deborah earlier about this. So it's time and again, day by day, I and a lot of my colleagues in healthcare chaplaincy, as well as ethicists, have the experience of families coming to these crisis events with their loved ones at an end of life, usually in an ICU, without having thought through all of this. And the crisis becomes even more painful because there has not been a direction. And so sometimes days and weeks can go by with, you just see the suffering in that family because there hadn't really been a conversation about what this is supposed to be like. And I also see the suffering on the faces of my colleagues who are nurses and doctors, because we're trying to do the right thing and not quite sure what that's going to be.
And doing it without direction from that person. And
and in my own family, within the last year, I've lost my mother, and she was very clear, which made her passing much easier, that we knew exactly what she wanted. She had told us, not only had she written it down, but she was so clear, and it made that difficult experience more sacred, more special, and more more special for her in her last hours and last days.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, I think that is a terrific spot to end our conversation on, and I just really appreciate both of you sharing this information, because you're right, sometimes whether it's end of life or other things in that we have to deal with in our daily lives, we often wait till a crisis to find out information. So any way that we can continue to encourage people to have this conversation, I think is really important. And so I want to tell people that they can go to the Healthcare Quality Institute website and learn even more about this project, as well as watch a video that explains the project more and really talks about why this is important to have this conversation. So I'm glad that you came to share this information with our viewers today, and I really appreciate both of your time, taking time out of your schedule for that. And thank all of you for sharing your time with us today. Aging Insights is produced by the New Jersey Foundation for Aging and is made possible by donations to the foundation. To become a sponsor for Aging Insights programs, please go to our website at www.njfoundationforaging.org or call our office at 609-421-0206. Our previous episodes may be viewed on our website. We want to remind you to find out about senior services in your area. Please contact your county office on aging. Their numbers are also on our website, or you can call the state hotline at 1-877-222-3737. Thank you for watching this episode of Aging Insights, and remember, aging is everyone's business.
Through Conversation of Your Life, we encourage you to take a look through these documents to decide what is right for you. Share your completed documents with loved ones and your healthcare provider. Keep your completed documents in an accessible location and revisit these documents every few years or whenever your health changes. Conversation of Your Life offers